Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. You know, there's two kinds of ass kickers. One is the sort of the brute force, blunt instrument variety. Throws haymakers, but can leave themselves exposed. The other is the type of person with the experience and technical skills to exhibit controlled aggression, to line up their shots and rarely miss, to punch and counterpunch. Tom Homan is a good example of the ass kicker that is controlled aggression, knows his stuff, has the experience, the technical skills. So is Kash Patel, from my view. Kash Patel, who was DOD Chief of Staff in Trump 1 and is widely rumored to be FBI Deputy Director, much to the chagrin of the usual FBI establishment types that now populate the desks at MSNBC. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about, because Patel, former federal prosecutor, Patel talking about the corruption of the classification system on Sean Ryan's podcast. Sean Ryan, former Navy SEAL, CIA. It's a good example of somebody sort of who knows the landscape, has the technical skill, the background to properly exploit it in furtherance of the mission here.
Trump 2 was you need a 24/7 declassification office, whatever you want to call it. Transparency, truth, whatever, I don't care. Sits in the White House, reports directly to you, and you take incoming from the United States of America. I want JFK. I want the 9/11 files. I want this. I want that. All the FBI, and this is a tool, this is something we didn't cover. What the deep state uses the most to cover up their corruption is an illegal application of the classification system. Remember the Lovebirds text from, this is a beauty, the Lovebirds text from FBI, DOJ land, Russiagate, Strzok and Page were texting each other. They were running the Russiagate investigation against Trump. They were the head of the counterintelligence unit at the FBI. And they're having an extramarital affair together. Can't make this stuff up. They're sending each other texts about how much they hate Trump and are going to create an insurance policy to stop Trump. Then we finally find those text messages. You know what the FBI and DOJ do for like a year? Redact them to congressional investigators and congressional men and women running the oversight of their agency. That's just one example. But it gets even better. Here's the deep state full circle. Just last week, do you know what Strzok and Page received from the Department of Justice?
What?
A $1.5 million payout to settle a lawsuit that Strzok and Page brought for the improper disclosure of their personal text messages on FBI phones. And the DOJ just rewarded them. They broke the law. They broke the chain of command. They broke every regulation there is in the FBI. They weaponized the system of justice against a political target they hated. We found those text messages, and we got them declassified finally in full when I became Deputy Director of National Intelligence. And the world has now seen them, and they can read them. And that's the best form of transparency. That's why I want this 24/7 declassification office. Don't have me regurgitate it to you. Read it. Get the documents, get the files, get the memos. But the deep state came full circle and gave these guys a payday for rigging a presidential election and breaking the law. So now you know what happens. That's step one. Step two, get America the truth. And that's what that office would be for.
I love it. And not only did Strzok and Page get a payday, and then Strzok gets a sinecure at Georgetown University, Andy McCabe, the deputy director, who was written up in the Inspector General's reports for similar violations of FBI policy at minimum, arguably the law. Somebody was lying before Congress. It was Comey or McCabe, or both of them in different ways. And he gets his pension reinstated by the Biden administration. This is what we're talking about, what we've been talking about, what needs to happen, the accountability for bad actors who committed discernible bad acts, full investigation to the extent that the one is required, and accountability. And you need to have the Kash Patels and the Tom Homans, that sort of profile, I think, in order to affect that accountability. Another such person who I think fits the description is Mike Davis. He's the founder and president of the Article 3 Project, former chief counsel for nominations to the Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Charles Grassley. Mike Davis, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So, I mean, just in terms of, what Kash talked about, a while back on that podcast, the National Office for Declassification, to deal with the sort of systemic corruption of how deep state actors, as he describes, keep important information that should be consumed by the American people from the American people. I mean, it's the same thing we see now with sort of Jack Smith on the precipice of walking away from these prosecutions that he ginned up against President Trump. And we're supposed to just, from their perspective, and frankly, some perspective, I think, of some on the center right, let's just let that go away. Trump was victorious. Now we move on and we need to focus on the policy agenda prospectively. But it seems to me, and I know from some of the things you've said on Bannon Show and that you've tweeted as well, that part of that policy agenda moving forward is what Kash Patel is talking about and is more than just Jack Smith being allowed to walk away.
Yeah, President Biden and these Democrats, prosecutors and witnesses and judges and other operatives in New York, D.C., Southern District of Florida, Atlanta, Arizona, Colorado, Maine, they ran this unprecedented Republican-ending lawfare and election interference against President Trump. They tried to bankrupt him. They tried to throw him in prison for life for non-crimes in 4 different indictments. They tried to take him off the ballots in Colorado and Maine under a bogus theory of insurrection under the 14th Amendment that was reversed 9-0 by the Supreme Court of the United States. They managed to lose the 3 liberal justices on that theory. They even tried to take off President Trump's head twice when they underfunded his Secret Service protection and President Biden said that Trump was the gravest threat to democracy, essentially compared him to Hitler. There must be severe legal, financial, and political consequences for this lawfare and election interference. This is a criminal conspiracy under 18 U.S.C. Section 241, a very serious federal civil rights felony conspiracy against rights. When you politicize and weaponize intel agencies and law enforcement to go after your political enemies for non-crimes, that is the very definition of 18 U.S.C. Section 241. There must be accountability. This can never happen again.
Well, who do you go after first?
Well, I would open a grand jury investigation in Fort Pierce, Florida. That's where the Democrats ran the unprecedented illegal raid on the office of former president for presidential records that President Trump was allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act. And you investigate all of these bad actors. We know that Joe Biden's fingerprints were on all 4 of these unprecedented criminal prosecutions of President Trump. You had Jonathan Sue, President Biden's deputy White House counsel, waive President Trump's claim of constitutional executive privilege going back 250 years to George Washington on behalf of President Biden, which led to the Mar-a-Lago raid, which led to Jack Smith's 2 bogus indictments, one in Florida and one in D.C., one for espionage for presidential records he's allowed to have, and one for his Jack Smith's bogus January 6th theory in D.C. for objecting to a presidential election, which is allowed by the Electoral Count Act of 1887 and the First Amendment. You also have Matthew Colangelo deploying from the number 3 office in the Biden Justice Department, a very senior political appointee who deployed to Alvin Bragg's office, this Soros-funded DA, to bring the first indictment ever against a former president for the non-crime of a businessman settling a nuisance claim and putting it in his private books as a legal expense. I've been a lawyer for nearly 20 years. I don't know what the hell else you would call it other than a legal expense. And then Nathan Wade, Danny Willis's special counsel / boyfriend down in Fulton County, Georgia, actually billed his time 16 hours, $250 an hour, $4,000 to Fulton County taxpayers to meet with the Biden White House, including the Biden White House counsel, before Fani Willis brought her bogus January 6th indictment. This is obviously coordinated lawfare and election interference against President Trump. And they said that the election is irrelevant. This is about chasing real crimes. This is about the rule of law. So why did they all drop their charges after President Trump won the election? And that proves that this was election interference all along.
The nexus for the state level prosecutions in Manhattan and Fulton County, is that nexus to essentially have DOJ look into it? What you described in terms of the DOJ official Colangelo being drop shipped to Manhattan and Nathan Wade coming to meet with the Biden White House, is that what provides the opportunity for federal investigation of those state level activities?
Absolutely. Look, they were trying to take out President Trump with any means possible: bankrupt, indict, throw in prison for life, take him off the ballot illegally in Colorado and Maine. It didn't matter. This was lawfare. This was election interference. These were for non-crimes, and they know it. They pushed bogus legal theories, untested legal theories against a former and likely future president. Jack Smith did something unprecedented. He brought a separate indictment in D.C. after he drew Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida, because Judge Cannon would be a fair judge who would look out for the criminal defendant's rights, which is what a judge's job is. So Jack Smith brought a separate indictment for January 6th in D.C. in front of D.C. Obama Judge Tanya Chutkan against the same defendants at the same time. So two different indictments in two different federal venues. That's unprecedented, right? And the only reason Jack Smith did that is because he was afraid that Judge Eileen Cannon would actually give Trump a fair process in the Southern District of Florida. He knew that a D.C. judge, and he picked the perfect one with D.C. Obama Judge Tanya Chutkan, would railroad him. Remember what they did? With presidential immunity, they said that they had to skip the D.C. circuits because this was so important. It had to get resolved before the election. And so, we have to go to straight to the Supreme Court of the United States, right? And then after they lose that and they do a separate appeal, then they change their position. The government changed its position under Jack Smith. They got D.C. Obama Judge Tanya Chutkan to allow Jack Smith to put on a partisan show trial right before the election, blatant election interference, where the government's put on its case instead of the defendant filing his motion to dismiss and then the government responding. They reversed it because Jack Smith knew he wouldn't be able to get this evidence out there before the election if they didn't get D.C. Obama Judge Tanya Chutkan to reverse it. Every step of the way, Jack Smith tried to railroad President Trump, tried to break norms, and it was obviously about election interference. The fact that he shut down his... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, what do you say, just in terms of the criminal exposure for a Jack Smith or other officers of the court, what do you say to the response? Well, wait a second, there's prosecutorial discretion here, judicial discretion, and you don't want to do anything that would have a chilling effect on prosecutorial and judicial discretion.
Well, there's a difference between when you are a judge in your robe versus when you take off that judicial robe and put on your partisan pom-poms. And that's exactly what D.C. Obama Judge Tanya Chutkan, Judge Arthur Engoron in New York, Judge Juan Merchan in New York City. These judges were partisan participants in this lawfare. And look, think about it this way. Mm-hmm. With these judges, with these prosecutors, with these witnesses, would they have discretion if they were politicizing and weaponizing their offices against Black Americans? Would we say, oh, sorry, we shouldn't prosecute them? This is going to have a chilling effect, so we shouldn't prosecute them because they're, this is their discretion to target Black Americans simply because they're Black. This is why we have federal civil rights statutes, including 18 U.S.C. Section 241, conspiracy against rights. Again, when you politicize and weaponize intel agencies and law enforcement against political enemies for non-crimes, that is squarely within the definition of conspiracy against rights.
Do you have any feel as to whether AG Pam Bondi shares your view on this?
I don't know what she's publicly said about this, but I strongly support Pam Bondi to be Trump's attorney general. She was Florida's attorney general for 8 years. She's been a very successful lawyer for decades. She looks a lot younger than she is. She's a great person. She's bold. She's fearless. And she's going to follow the law wherever it leads, and nobody's above the law.
Mike Davis, founder and president of the Article 3 Project, former chief counsel for nominations to Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley as well. Mike, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Love to have you back. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. They're a bank with roots right here in Chicago, and their decisions are made locally too. I'm Dan Proft, and I know this because Signature Bank is my business bank.
Hi, I'm Mick O'Rourke, President and CEO of Signature Bank. We'd like to wish you happy holidays from our Signature Bank family to your family.
Signature Bank helps local